Hello and welcome to Homemaking with Joy. My name is Rachel and today I'm starting the process of making chicken corn soup. I'm going to start with the whole bird and cook it for the meat, then cook the bones into broth and then can it to have a shelf-stable, ready-to-go soup. I'm very excited. This process is going to take a little while, but it will be a big accomplishment for me. So if you'd like to see how I do it, join me and let's get started. The first part of this recipe that I think is really cool is I'm starting with a whole chicken that my husband's grandmother raised and had butchered and then came to us. So it's local, I know it was treated well, and I'm going to use this whole bird to make us lots of yummy meals. So first things first, let's get it out of the bag and into my Instant Pot. The chicken just barely fits in here, but that's fine. It's still slightly frozen, so it will like squish and make more space as it cooks and thaws. The next thing I need to add is water, so you need at least 1 cup of water in here. You could add seasonings, but I'm not going to worry about it. I just want to cook the chicken and get on to the next part because it will be seasoned and stuff in the soup. So chicken's in there, water's in there. I'm going to put the lid on and set the pressure cook timer. My chicken's in there. Lid is on, set to sealing, and about a 5-pound chicken cooks for about 30 minutes. I don't know how much mine weighs, but that's what I'm going to do. And even if it's not cooked completely through, for me that doesn't even matter because I will then be turning it into soup and canning it for 90 minutes, so it'll be plenty cooked. My chicken is done cooking and it's been on the keep warm setting for about 30 minutes. I think that keep warm setting is just one of the greatest parts of the Instant Pot because I can just let it sit and get back to it when I have the time. So I'm going to turn that off now. You can see the airlock is down, so there's no pressure in there. I can just open that, take the lid off, and my chicken is cooked. I am going to figure out a way to get it out of there so it can cool, so I can pull the chicken off the bones and then stick the bones back in the pot to make broth. This is what I have in my Instant Pot now. It's the water that I used to cook it and whatever juices came off the chicken. I'm going to leave it like that and just toss bones in it to make broth overnight. And I have my chicken here cooling. It looks a little bit gross right now, and I don't particularly love this part of the process. But this chicken will feed us many meals, so I'm going to put on my big girl pants and pick all the meat off the bones and then stick all the bones in here. I got all my chicken picked off the bone, so that will go in the fridge overnight. And I put my carcass in my Instant Pot. The liquid in there is just the leftover from the cooking process, and I have the whole carcass, all the bones and everything. So then I grabbed my bag of kitchen scraps. Anytime I peel carrots, onions, chop celery, anything like that, I put it in this bag so I can add it to my broth. This makes it flavorful, adds nutrition, and I don't have to waste any of my good carrots or celery or onions in here. So add a little bit more. Now I'm going to add some water. Inside the Instant Pot, you have a pressure cooker max line, which is 2/3 full. There's also a half line. So usually when I do this, I will fill it up to the halfway line and then set it on 1 cook cycle. After that cook cycle is over, I will open the lid, check my levels because the bones will break down more and the vegetables will settle in, and I will fill it up to the pressure cooker 2/3 line. That will get me the maximum amount of broth. So at this point, I'm just gonna fill it up to the half line and then put it in my Instant Pot to start cooking. You're welcome to add any other things that you think would make a yummy broth, any herbs or spices, salt, pepper, whatever you want. I generally keep it really basic and then we'll season it when I put it in my food. So I'm going to grab my Instant Pot now and put the liner in. Wait, I forgot one more thing. The apple cider vinegar always goes in my broth too. It helps to pull out some of the nutrition from in those bones. Now I'll get my Instant Pot. I have everything in my pot and it's ready to go back in the Instant Pot. I wanted to share that this is by far the easiest way that I have found to make bone broth. Bone broth is very nourishing and I like to feed it to my family, but I'm not going to stand at the stove and let the broth simmer for however long it takes. I get gelatinous broth this way and it's really hands off. So if you're looking for a way to try this, I highly recommend the Instant Pot method. I will put this through 2 cook settings. So you'll see me push the soup/broth button. I have that set at low pressure for either 2 hours or 4 hours. I will probably do 4 hours this time because it will just cook overnight. And like I said, after that setting or after that cook cycle, I will take the lid off, add some more water and put it on another either 2-hour cycle or 4-hour cycle, depending on what my day looks like. And then otherwise it'll just stay warm until I'm ready to address it. And again, that's one of the things I like about the Instant Pot and I like about this method. It will just stay there until I'm ready for it. I have 2 kids, I'm very busy, and so this just takes it off my mental load, you know, but I can still make really good food. So let me show you what buttons I push to get this set up, and then I get to go to bed. Here's my broth. It's not pretty, but it is delicious and nutritious. Lid goes on, set it to sealing. And then soup or broth, which is just low pressure for a certain amount of time. So this will be 4 hours. It'll cook itself, and then I'll come back in the morning. Good morning. I'm doing a quick check-in. This is my broth after it cooked all night. You can see the pressure cooker max line in the back. I'm going to add more water until we reach that line. That gets me the maximum amount of broth in my Instant Pot. There we go. That's it. Let's put the lid back on. Whoop. There we go. Sealing. Soup broth. And that's it. Again, pushing buttons is my favorite. My chicken broth is done cooking in the Instant Pot, so I'm going to strain it to get all the bones and big things out, and then put it in jars with a small strainer to get all the little bits out. My original plan was to make and can the soup today, but I have 2 sick kids, and so I don't want to babysit the canner or try to work in the kitchen too much with them sick. So I'm just going to take care of the broth, stick it all in the fridge, and then probably assemble and can it tomorrow, because that's how life works. And I have gotten creative and figured out the best ways to do things in small increments, because being a mom is my first priority, especially when I have 2 sick kiddos. So let's get this out of the Instant Pot, strain it through here. This is a big colander inside a glass bowl. It has a pour spout on it. So I'll pour it into here first, and then I have a large mason jar with a funnel and a small strainer. So I'll stick it in the top, use the pour spout to pour it in here, and then store it in the fridge in these. Ooh, it's still bubbling. Usually I let it sit for a while so I can just pick it up by the pot, the liner, but it's super hot, so I don't want to burn myself. I'm going to grab something else. We're going to use a ladle to make sure nothing splashes and no one gets hurt, namely me. Okay, that's getting pretty close to the bottom, and for demonstration's sake, I'll show you how I do the next part. So this comes out, just prop it here. This is what I have, and I don't think you can see, but I have little floaty bits in it, which I don't really want. So here we have mason jar, funnel, again, small strainer, goes inside the funnel, and then I pour it through here. This is what I got out. You can leave that in there if you don't mind it in your soup or whatever, but I don't really like it. So this is what I have so far. I will just keep repeating this process until my jars are full. One other note, you'll see right here, that is the fat or the grease that came off of the chicken, because I included some of the skin in the cooking process. So if I were going to can it right now, I would probably just leave that in there and can it, and it would be just fine. But because I'm going to stick it in the fridge overnight, that will solidify on the top, and then I can scoop it out. So if you want the fat out of there, just refrigerate it, and then you can scoop off the solidified fat. But again, this is a home-raised chicken just from down the road from someone I know. She treated it well and fed it well, and so a little bit of that chicken grease is not going to bother me. And I have never found it to be too much grease that it affects my canning seal. So take that into account whenever you make this recipe. So I guess I'll just keep going and stick this in the fridge then. I will probably not show all that part because I'm also managing kiddos. So I will see you when I see you, when I assemble this soup and then get it ready for the canner, hopefully tomorrow. The kids are in bed and I have a little bit of time, so I figured I would assemble the jars tonight, stick them in the fridge, and then just can them tomorrow. I don't anticipate that they will be completely healed from their sickness tomorrow, so if I don't have to do all of this with kids around and grumpy, that is ideal. So for this recipe, I have chicken, I have onion, I have corn, chicken broth, salt, and pepper. That's all that you put in this. I will fill the jar halfway with chicken and corn and then top it off with the broth. I think I'll be adding like a 1/4 teaspoon of salt and just like a shake of pepper. It's much easier to season it after you get it out of the jar and warm it up. So that's what you'll see me do here. I'm going to fill it up to 1 inch of head space, and then I have some reusable lids that I'll just stick on and put them in the fridge. And that's it. It's pretty straightforward. Tomorrow I will warm them up and then stick them in the canner and can them for 90 minutes. But for now, we're just assembling. One note about the meat. I like to keep the meat in bigger chunks if possible. It helps to keep the texture a little bit better, considering it's going to be under pressure for 90 minutes tomorrow. And it's really easy to just flake it apart in your soup after you open the jar and warm it up. So if you can get it off in big chunks, I like to do that better. Shaking it down to see how full it actually is. Probably add a little bit more. You're welcome to use measuring cups or whatever, but your fingers work just as well. One of the things about canning soups like this is that usually you only want the solid ingredients to be about half of your jar, and then you top it with broth. One of the most important things with pressure canning is making sure the very inside of the jar reaches 240 degrees, so it could kill any possible botulism spores. If your product is too dense, the heat cannot penetrate the whole way, and then it won't make a safe product. So that's why most soups like this, you do half solids and the rest broth. I'll add my salt and pepper now. Just a shake of pepper. Nothing specific. There you go. I forgot to grab my debubbler tool. Let me get that. This is my debubbler. So you stick this in, or any other like plastic utensil, to make sure if there are any air pockets that we get those out now. You want to make sure you have the appropriate head space with your broth. The science of it is that there's an inch of head space. When your product is in the canner, it gets really, really hot and forces all of the air out of the jar. And so the correct headspace means they've tested it and they know that all of the air will leave the jar if there's this amount of headspace. And then when you take it out of the canner and it cools, it vacuum seals shut. If I add too much or have too much headspace, I can't guarantee that all of the air will be forced out, excuse me, and I'll have a safe product. So the headspace is important, and getting out air bubbles is important because that can adjust the headspace. Still looking good. So this is the first jar done. I'll put a lid on it, put it in the fridge, and come back to it tomorrow. Welcome back. It's the next day at nap time and I'm ready to can some chicken corn soup. There are a couple things to keep in mind if you choose to stretch out this process like I do. Most canners will do this all in one day, but with 2 small children, that's just not really an option for me. So I've learned a couple of tricks, tips to help this process go more smoothly. So about an hour before I plan to can, or whatever you think of it, I pulled my jars out of the fridge to come to room temperature just a little bit more. I did put water in my canner already, and it is room temperature water. Because if I put warm water in here and then put cold jars in, they would crack or the liquid would siphon out a lot, which I've done before. I don't want to do that. What else? I have these reusable lids on my jars from in the fridge. So I'm going to take those off, clean the rim, put my fresh lid on, and then put my jar in my canner. Some people use a paper towel. I don't like to use paper towels. I have a microfiber cloth here, just water. I clean the rim really, really well, and that seems to work fine for me. This is also when you can check for nicks or cracks in your jar. Ideally, that would have happened before you filled it, but better late than never. That's clean. I can even see some stuff on my cloth. New lid, ring. And this needs to be fingertip tight, so I like to turn it until it moves on my counter, then give it like a quarter twist more. And then it is ready for my canner. All of my jars are now in my canner. It's ready to get the lid on and turn the heat on. I am very serious about the safety features of my pressure canner, and so I always check those before I can anything. And I thought I'd walk you through those because a pressure canner blowing up is everyone's worst nightmare, but there are lots of features to make sure that doesn't happen. So let me show you. Grab your lid. This is the steam vent right here. This is where all the steam comes out. And so that should be clear. So you hold it up to the light and you should be able to see through it. Yes, I can. If for some reason it's blocked and you can't see through it, get like a straw cleaner and clean that out. Next, I check the silicone ring, make sure it's fully intact and in the right spot. Then I check, this is the airlock. So this part like screws on the bottom, so I make sure that's together correctly. And this is the like blowout valve. So if for some reason your canner would be at too much pressure or like for fear of blowing up, this would blow out and make sure that the pressure was released. And so I like to make sure that is in place correctly. Also, you can buy replacements of this little one and the silicone ring. So at some point I will have those on hand just in case like they break or something, then I can keep canning. Then the dial, this just stays the same. You do want to get this checked every year to make sure it is still accurate and you're canning at the correct PSI. So that's good to go. I'm going to put it on. My Presto has an arrow here and an arrow here, and so I line those up. It sits on top and then twist it. Wonderful. Now for the heat. Again, because I refrigerated these overnight, they are not warm. Usually you'd hot pack these jars. Your water would be warm, your canned goods would be warm, and so you just crank the temperature until you get that boil. I have had too many jars siphon, and I've learned the hard way that you have to heat it up slowly when they have been refrigerated. You need to get the inside of your contents of your jar to 240 degrees through the canning process. If you push the temperature, this water will boil, your jars will get warm, but the inside contents of your jars take much longer to get warm. So I prefer to heat things up really slowly. For me, it's worth the time to not have siphoning and to not have lid failures. So I'm going to turn this on to like probably the number 3 on my dial, 3 heat, and let it sit for maybe 5 minutes. And then I'll turn it up to level 5 for about 5 minutes and just work my way up slowly so my jars can all come to temperature together. What else? Yeah, that's my biggest tip. Also, reminder, don't put your weight on yet. I will come back when we are at a full boil and venting and show you what that looks like. But for now, just gotta warm it up slowly. An update on the canner. I have the heat cranked. Can you hear it boiling? I'm also seeing water start to come out of the airlock. There it is. That means it's pushing steam out there. You can see the safety valve in the back is starting to become pressurized. That means we are getting close. Once the airlock pops up, then we will start venting. And the airlock is up. This officially starts our venting process. You can see that this is up, that is pressurized, and now all the steam from inside the canner is being forced out of that vent. It's hard to see on camera. You can see it up here on the microwave, the condensation that is coming. So we are going to leave it like this. I will turn the temperature down just a little bit, but leave it like this for 10 minutes. The goal is to replace all of the air inside the canner with steam. And we have a sleepy kid. BRB. We have been venting for 10 minutes, so it's time to put the weight on. Just like that. Now all of the steam is stuck inside the canner and it will raise the pressure. I will watch the dial until we hit, I think it's 10 pounds of pressure for this recipe. Once we hit 10 pounds of pressure, we will keep it at 10-ish pounds of pressure, no lower, but maybe like 10 to 12 for 90 minutes. Also, as a new canner, this freaked me out. A whole bunch of water comes out of the airlock valve whenever it starts to push up because it's steam, you know, but it evaporates and goes away. So you're not doing anything wrong. That's normal. I double checked my recipe and this soup process is at 11 pounds of pressure because I have a dial gauge. So as soon as it hits 11 here, I will start my 90-minute timer. The more you can, the more you will learn how to adjust the heat. So once our pressure started increasing, I turned my dial down to about 5 so it could increase slowly, which will make changes much easier. The more I can on this specific burner, the more I learn that about number 3 down here will keep my pressure consistent. So are we at 11? Yes, we are at 11. So I'll keep it between 11 and 13 by adjusting that dial down to about 3. I will do it slowly so nothing jumps too much. But we are gonna sit here for 90 minutes. I've been standing here watching the dial on my canner for a couple of minutes to get the pressure leveled out. Again, I know which number on my heat dial will get me a leveled pressure, so it's been pretty quick and easy. From here on out, I will just check it like every 5 minutes. I'll set a timer on my watch to come check it and make sure we're still at the correct pressure. Some notes about kids. I do talk to my kids thoroughly about not touching this or getting anywhere near it. And generally we play in a room away from the canner. While I don't think it will blow up or anything bad will happen, it's just good practice for me and like one of those mom things, you know? Like I'm the only one in the kitchen when the canner is running and that just makes me feel better. So if you're looking at this and thinking or feeling anxious about it, you're not alone there. I've done this lots of times and I still just, my kids are just out of the way. They are always safe, that's always the priority, and I will just come check the canner every 5 minutes. My timer is done. The only thing I'm going to do is turn off the heat. And the timer, of course. I think I read in the Presto manual that from here you're supposed to move this off of this burner of heat so it cools down, but I don't understand why you would ever move anything at pressure. So I just let it sit there and it will slowly go down to 0 pressure. And then the airlock will drop, and then I know it's safe to take off the weight, and eventually the lid, and then eventually the jars. But for now, they just sit here bubbling. My dial gauge is at 0 and my airlock has dropped, so now I know it's safe to take the weight off. I'll let it sit for a couple of minutes, then take the lid off, let it sit for a couple more minutes, and then take my jars out while handling kids and dinner. jars out of the canner at least 15 minutes ago, and they are still boiling. Also, clearly I forgot to add a splash of white vinegar to the water in my canner because I have all of this. This white stuff on the outside of the jar is minerals from our water. So I will have fun wiping that off. There's some more. They all sealed, and I'm very happy to have these done. Shelf stable meals.